Elon Musk had seen and experienced a lot in his lifetime, building companies, sending rockets to space, and pushing the limits of human innovation. But nothing could have prepared him for the moment he met an old, weary man on the streets of Los Angeles. It wasn't just any man. This was a former sheriff, a man who had once upheld the law, protected his community, and spent decades serving people. And now he had nothing. No home, no badge, no family. Just the clothes on his back and the memories that haunted him. The encounter happened outside a quiet cafe late one evening. Elon had just stepped out after a long business meeting, craving a few minutes of fresh air. As he walked towards his car, he noticed the old man sitting on a bench, staring at the ground, lost in thought. There was something about him, something different from the countless other faces he had passed on the streets. Curiosity got the better of him, and instead of walking away, he stopped. "Rough night?" Elon asked, his voice calm but filled with genuine interest. The man looked up, his eyes carrying the weight of years gone by. "More like a rough few years," he replied with a dry chuckle. Elon sat down beside him, something he never usually did with strangers. What started as a simple conversation quickly turned into something much deeper. The retired sheriff shared his story, the years of dedication, the sacrifices he made, and the tragedy that left him with nothing. He spoke about how life had a way of taking unexpected turns, and how, no matter how hard you fought, sometimes fate had other plans. Elon listened intently, his usual sharp, analytical mind now focused on something more human, more real than any business deal. And then, just as the conversation reached its peak, the old man revealed something shocking, something that would change the course of their meeting forever. What happened next left Elon completely speechless. Elon leaned in slightly, his curiosity now fully locked onto the man sitting beside him. The former sheriff took a deep breath, as if deciding whether he should continue. His fingers fidgeted with the frayed edges of his old jacket, and his voice carried the weight of someone who had spent too long carrying a burden alone. "It wasn't just bad luck that put me here," he said finally. "It was something bigger." Elon didn't interrupt. He knew when to listen. The sheriff's eyes flickered with something between sorrow and determination as he continued. "I spent 30 years in law enforcement, saw the best and worst of people. But there was one case, one moment, that changed everything for me." The wind rustled the trees, and for a brief second, it was as if the world around them faded. It was just two men, one with the power to change the future, and the other trapped in the shadows of the past. "It was a routine arrest," the sheriff explained. "At least, that's what I thought. A man we'd been watching for years, someone powerful, untouchable. The kind of guy who always slipped through the cracks. But that night, we finally had enough to bring him in." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Except, I never got the chance." Elon's gaze sharpened. He could feel the shift in the air, the weight of something unspoken. "They warned me to walk away, told me I was getting too close. But I didn't listen. I thought the law would protect me." The sheriff let out a bitter laugh. "Next thing I knew, my career was over. My reputation destroyed. Everything I built gone overnight." Elon's mind raced. He had dealt with powerful figures before, seen how the world worked behind closed doors. But there was something unsettling about the way the sheriff spoke, like he had uncovered something he was never meant to. "And now?" Elon asked, his voice steady. The sheriff met his gaze, his next words sending a chill down Elon's spine. "Now I'm being watched again." Elon felt a strange, electric tension settle between them. The sheriff's words weren't just paranoia. There was a certainty in his voice, like a man who had spent too long looking over his shoulder. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distant hum of city life filled the silence, but here on this dimly lit sidewalk, it felt like they were in a world of their own. "Who's watching you?" Elon finally asked, his voice low. The sheriff exhaled slowly, rubbing his weathered hands together as if trying to chase away an unseen chill. "I don't know who exactly," he admitted, "but I know what they're capable of." He leaned in slightly, his eyes scanning the street, the rooftops, the parked cars, anywhere a set of eyes might be lurking. "After I lost my badge, I thought that would be the end of it. They got what they wanted. I was a nobody. A disgraced cop with nothing left to lose. But then things started happening. My old partner died in a hit and run. Files from my last few cases disappeared. And a few weeks ago, I found a note stuffed in my coat pocket. No name, no threats, just 3 words." He swallowed hard before whispering them. "Let it go." Elon's mind raced. He was no stranger to controversy, to people who wanted to silence ideas or bury the truth. He had taken on powerful industries, challenged governments, disrupted entire systems. But this felt different. This wasn't business. This was personal. "What were you trying to expose?" Elon pressed, his curiosity now a fire that couldn't be put out. The sheriff hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't think I should be telling you this, son. You've got a lot to lose." Elon let out a quiet chuckle, not out of amusement, but because he knew the feeling all too well. "You'd be surprised what I've already risked." The sheriff studied him, as if weighing whether to trust him. Then, just as he opened his mouth to speak, a sudden noise cut through the quiet. A car engine revving in the distance, tires screeching against pavement. Both men turned instinctively, and Elon saw it too late. A black SUV was speeding toward them. Elon barely had time to react. The sheriff's grip tightened on his arm, yanking him back just as the black SUV tore past them, missing them by inches. The rush of air hit them like a shockwave, and the tires screeched as the vehicle skidded to a stop a few yards away. For a split second, everything was still, too still. Then the back window of the SUV rolled down just enough for Elon to see a shadowy figure inside. No words, no movement, just the undeniable feeling that they weren't meant to be standing there. The sheriff's face darkened. "We need to go. Now." Elon wasn't the type to run, but something in the old man's voice told him this wasn't a fight he was ready for, not yet. Without hesitation, they darted down a side alley, their footsteps echoing between the walls. The city felt different now, the familiar streets suddenly foreign and filled with unseen threats. Elon could hear his pulse pounding in his ears, but the sheriff moved like a man who had done this before, like someone who knew what it meant to be hunted. "This isn't just about me anymore," the sheriff muttered as they rounded a corner, momentarily disappearing into the shadows. "They know you're involved now." Elon didn't slow down. Then it's too late to back out. They reached a rusted metal door in the side of an old building. The sheriff hesitated for only a moment before pushing it open. Inside was a small, abandoned storage room, the air thick with dust. A single dim light flickered from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The sheriff locked the door behind them and turned to face Elon. "I never told you the whole truth," he admitted. His voice was lower now, almost a whisper. "The case I was working on, it wasn't just any arrest. It was tied to something bigger, something that reached into places I never should have gone." Elon's jaw clenched. "Then tell me everything." The sheriff took a deep breath, but before he could speak, something outside made them both freeze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Someone had followed them. The footsteps outside stopped just beyond the door. Elon and the sheriff didn't move, barely even breathed. The sheriff's hand hovered near his pocket as if reaching for something, a habit from years of carrying a badge and a gun. But there was nothing there now, just empty space and the weight of survival instincts. A faint knock echoed through the small room. Not aggressive, not hurried, just a single, deliberate tap. Whoever was on the other side wasn't in a rush. They knew Elon and the sheriff were trapped. Elon glanced around the storage room. No windows, no other exits. They had nowhere to go. His mind raced through possibilities, but the sheriff's next move surprised him. He stepped toward the door, pressing his back against the wall, and motioned for Elon to stay silent. Then slowly he reached out and turned the knob. The door creaked open an inch, just enough for the sheriff to see who was outside. His body tensed instantly. "No, this isn't possible," he whispered under his breath. Elon stepped closer, but before he could get a look, the sheriff yanked the door open fully. Standing there, illuminated by the flickering hallway light, was a man in a dark suit. His face was unreadable, his stance calm, too calm. He wasn't armed, at least not visibly, but there was something chilling in the way he looked at them, like he had already planned every possible move they could make. The sheriff's voice was low and shaken. "I watched you die." Elon's breath caught. He turned to the sheriff, searching for an explanation, but the older man looked like he had just seen a ghost. The suited man took a slow step inside, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You were supposed to," the man said quietly. The room felt colder now, the air heavier. Elon didn't know who this man was, but something told him they had just stepped into a deeper game than either of them had realized. The sheriff's hands clenched into fists. "What do you want?" the sheriff demanded. The man glanced at Elon. "Not what?" "Who?" The room felt like it had shrunk, the air thick with tension. Elon watched the sheriff's face, searching for an answer, but the old man looked shaken to his core. Whoever this suited man was, he wasn't supposed to be standing here. He wasn't supposed to be alive. Elon stepped forward. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head slightly, studying Elon with a cold curiosity. "You already know," he said simply. The sheriff exhaled sharply. "He was my partner," he muttered. "The one who died in that so-called accident." His voice wavered, but there was anger behind it now, burning just beneath the surface. "They told me he was gone, that there was nothing I could do." The man let out a quiet, almost amused sigh. "They needed you to believe that." Elon's mind raced. "So you faked your death?" The man's expression didn't change. Not by choice. He turned his attention back to the sheriff. "I tried to warn you back then, but you wouldn't listen. You kept digging, and they made sure you lost everything." The sheriff's hands clenched. "Who are they?" A pause. The suited man glanced over his shoulder, as if checking for someone, or something, lurking in the shadows. Then in a voice just above a whisper, he said, "The same people who are watching us right now." Elon and the sheriff exchanged a look, their instincts screaming that something was wrong. Then without warning, the lights in the building flickered. A distant mechanical hum filled the air, growing louder, like a low-frequency vibration rattling through the walls. The suited man took a step back. "It's too late," he muttered. "They already know you're here." Before Elon could react, the door behind them burst open. Silhouettes filled the entrance, men in dark uniforms, moving with precision. "Run," the suited man whispered. But Elon and the sheriff had nowhere left to go. The room erupted into chaos. The dark figures moved fast, their footsteps pounding against the concrete floor. Elon barely had time to react before the sheriff grabbed his arm, pulling him behind a stack of crates for cover. The suited man didn't run. He stood still, as if he knew exactly how this would end. "You don't have to do this," the sheriff called out, his voice steady despite the tension. One of the uniformed men stepped forward. "It's not up to us." Elon's mind raced. He had faced high-stakes situations before, but this wasn't a business deal gone wrong or a corporate power struggle. This was something deeper, something that had been set in motion long before he ever met the sheriff. Then the suited man did something unexpected. He raised his hands in surrender. "Let them go," he said. "They don't have the files." Elon saw the sheriff's jaw tighten. "What files?" The suited man didn't answer. Instead, he gave the sheriff a look, one that spoke volumes. He was sacrificing himself. The leader of the dark-clad men nodded, signaling to his team. Two of them stepped forward, grabbing the suited man by the arms. He didn't resist. As they led him toward the door, he glanced back at Elon and the sheriff one last time. "Don't look for me," he said, "and don't look for the truth. You won't like what you find." Then, just like that, he was gone. The remaining men didn't follow. They stood by the door, watching, waiting. A warning. Elon and the sheriff weren't prisoners, but the message was clear. Walk away, or next time, there wouldn't be a choice. The sheriff let out a slow breath, his hands shaking slightly. "You think they're gonna let us just walk out of here?" Elon met his gaze. "They already have." Without another word, they stepped past the men in black, out into the cold night air. The world outside moved on like nothing had happened. But Elon knew better. Some secrets were never meant to be uncovered.